Hey, folks, and welcome to the show. It is Counter Clipping show number 109. Our topic tonight is the best of Avalon Hill Part 4. We'll be getting to that soon enough. We are drinking the Glenlivet 15. Thank you, Scott, for me continuing to enjoy this fine bottle. And we are still clipping Western Front, 1914 to 1918 from Der Weltkrieg, which I'm probably not finishing it tonight, but I probably will finish it before the next show. So, um, we have tonight. Before we get started, don't forget that there's a bunch of links in the video description to a variety of things. So check all those out. There is a link to the Ardwulf's Lair Discord server in this week's banner. Thank you, John Nemo, for becoming our newest patron at the swordsman level. Don't forget that super chats and super stickers are available if you would like to help support the channel. And the It's a good way to get your comment highlighted if, in case we have too many millions and millions of people here tonight. So, if you'll pardon me while I post some stuff here. I guess before we get going, the Mastodon Wargamer server continues to be doing, I think, pretty well. If anybody wants a link to that, let me know, and I can get you an invite. I don't think it's closed invite, so you can just kind of show up and sign up. But it's easier if you have an invite because then it will take you to exactly the right place, and you'll fill out your stuff and push the buttons, and you're done. So that's great. What else do we have here? Well, before we get going on to whatever else we have here, let me pull up the chat pop up, and we will say a big hello to Achilles, Andrew Frankie, Board Gaming Geezer, Chad Canady, Charles Latora, Clark Commando 1983, welcome Mark, 6 Actual just popped in, Dale Brady, Daniel O'Rourke, welcome to the stream, Daniel Silverthorne, Dicey Odds, Ed Meister, Findle 70, GWG Gaming with Garavalia, HUN 644, Iggy Cricktall, the legend himself, Fucko is in the house, James Conway, James Whitmer, Jason W., Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Joe Faust from sunny, not very sunny, Northeast Ohio, Joe Okabayashi, John Stanley, John C. from the definitely sunny Philippines, I'm totally sure. John Clark, Carl Crater from the Wargame Boot Camp, Kurt Wise. Kurt, let me know how you say that. I would appreciate the clarification that I will promptly forget before the next show. Lind Pratt from sunny Central Ohio, Mark McNair, Meandering Mike, Michael Simon, Ray Garby, Ray Musselman, Rick Cox, Robert Hassler, the One True Flem, Vince Ree, Wade Moore, Wardrobe, William Aarons, William Bird. Hopefully, I haven't missed too many people. I'm positive that I have, given that I seem to do that every single time, thanks to the rudimentary tool for this in YouTube. So I apologize in advance. Thomas Fairfowl, welcome to the stream. Paul Grassmer, thanks for coming back. So I'm only able to tilt this to a certain extent, but I'll show you the organizational scheme for Der Weltkrieg Western Front. This tray is for the Germans. This is not necessarily the final destination tray, but we're working on it. I don't have any like real substantive 3D printing news here, but we're still exploring options on that. So stay tuned. We'll do an actual show on that. Lee Grant, send me an you got a way to get a hold of me. There's a contact email for myself in the ticker. So send me an email. I'll send you an invite. I'll be happy to do that for anybody who asks. So, Paul Grossmere got his copy of Edelweiss. Gorgeous maps, absolutely gorgeous maps. I got mine. Actually, had a bit of a problem with mine through Noble Knight, which they were delighted to fix, but then the thing got shipped to my old address. So we managed to get that intercepted and rerouted back to Noble Knight. Then it went back to me. So thank you, Noble Knight, and the fine staff there for unfucking that particular situation. Speaking of getting fucked, the wrecker finally arrived today to haul out the wreckage of my former car. I don't have like the official number on what insurance is going to pay out on that, but I'm reasonably sure that they told me coldly over the phone after seeing the pictures that yeah, we're not that's not going to get repaired. So chances are the number of actual payout dollars is going to be real small. But we'll see how that works out. So that finally occurred. Weiss. Okay, very good, Kurt. Thank you for letting me know. Um, so that finally happened. We managed to get the car broke the tree that fell on it, right? So like the back half of this giant 14 foot, well, it was about 14 feet long actually. 14-inch around tree is like sitting behind the car. The wrecker couldn't get in there to get rid of it, so we had to deal with that over the weekend. So that was my fun weekend project, which went, as smoothly as I could have expected. I don't know if anybody saw my mail call post earlier on social media that went out on Twitter, Instagram, and Mastodon. I think I got an Avalon Hill copy of Frederick the Great. It is not a perfect condition copy, but I didn't pay perfect condition copy prices for it, so I am happy with that. So if it comes to, and the insides are, I don't know if it's complete. I haven't counted it yet. It is punched. The insides are real clean. The box is fairly beat up, but it's not like it's pretty far from the worst box I've ever seen. We got a couple more things coming in, which I will share when they arrive. And we will get an unboxing video this week. It's actually already uploaded. I made sure I got that done over the weekend in my copious free time. Strelnikov is here from sunny Vietnam. So thanks for stopping by. And Hexy from Hex to Hex, who is running an excellent YouTube channel over there. So go check him out and subscribe. Hexy, you guys beat me to the MMP news, which we're going to talk about right after this. So, if you may recall, a couple weeks ago, our friend Mark Ruggiero is fighting cancer. His wife's fighting cancer. There is a GoFundMe. There is a link to that GoFundMe in the video description. So, if you're able to contribute to that, I'm sure Mark and his wife will be very appreciative. John Clark, Freddie the Great. So no, I got the boxed Avalon Hill version. I actually already have the SPI version in the flats. In the flat, there's only one flat. It's not one of those SPI games in the flat. I don't know anything about that. Iggy Crypto. So Neil Bedkey, thanks for stopping by, and Joel, quitting time on the West Coast. Good for you, man. Menders. Thanks everybody for stopping by. All right, so let's hop over to the multi-man publishing anticipated 2023 list. Now, this isn't like even a real schedule. This is just when they all sit down together at Winter Offensive and in January, what they believe is going to get accomplished this year. Sometimes these things don't happen, and sometimes other stuff pops in a little earlier than expected. So we're going to talk about these in detail. Let me pull this over here so it's a little easier to deal. Shit, a little easier to deal with. All right, let me make sure you guys can see that. No, you cannot. All right, let me put it back here. Okay, so for Advanced Squad Leader, Winter Offensive Bonus Pack, and Drop Zone St. Mary-Glise, the historical ASL module, have been released. They are shipping now. Some people have already gotten them. Some people have already gotten them in the mail. If you bought them at Winter Offensive and they were both available there, then you have had them for 2 weeks now. Excuse me. The Marco Polo Bridge Historical ASL will go on pre-order. We'll get to this in a minute. ASL Journal 14 will be released. Now they don't normally pre-order the ASL journals. They just say, "Hey, they're for sale now," and there's a special, early bird price or whatever they're calling it for the first 30 days or 20 days or whatever it is. So you probably want to get in on the ground floor. I am a maybe on the bonus pack. I actually canceled my pre-order for St. Mary release. The timing was just bad. You can imagine right now, since it would have gotten charged like last week. So we weren't swinging that. ASL Journal 14, it's probably got good stuff in it. It's probably worth it. So pending hearing details about what's going to be in it, I'm probably going to get that. The Poniri or however the hell you say it, it's in the Soviet Union, and I believe it is part of Kursk, which is a historical ASL module that has been in the works for many, many years. That is going to go supposedly going to go on pre-order. The Contested Lands new module. Now, this is a module, like the Forgotten War for ASL 1948 Arab Israeli War. I have negative zero interest in this, if you know what I mean. So that is probably a not I don't need it decision for me. From a completionist standpoint, it is probably a good idea to get it because, first of all, it's probably not going to get reprinted quickly. We'll get to the subject of reprints in a second here. Wardrobe says that Journal 14 will be Anzac focused with the historical ASL module. That probably means that that journal issue is worthwhile, in my opinion. Anyway, Contested Lands, Arab Israeli Wars, uh, uh, not a bad idea in principle, I guess, because it's a conflict that's going to be fought a lot like World War II, right? So, system wise, it ought to work. I'm just not interested in that. If you There's a couple reasons I could think to get it. One would be the extra boards, which will probably be generic and universal. And the fact that if you have a copy and you keep it in the shrink wrap, in 3 years, you'll be able to sell it for triple the retail price. So that is just a fact of life in the ASL resale community, whether we like it or not. And it is a phenomenon that MMP helps to contribute to by their general stinginess about reprinting things. Um, Normally, however, ASL is not one of the things that they're super stingy about reprinting. But even there, I mean, very seldom do we see reprints of the historical modules, for example, even those going for tons and tons of money. Anyway, there will be a reprint of Armies of Oblivion going on pre-order. Now, the last time they revised, so MMP, when they revise these things, when they do a new version, they tend at some point in that chain, they will tend to add a bunch of material to the module. And they already did that with Armies of Oblivion. So I have the last version of Armies of Oblivion. I probably won't need this one. I'll be irritated if there's like a ton of new material that I then feel obligated to buy. Um, they are working on a reprint of Solitaire ASL. Notice that they're not saying it's coming this year, only that they're working on it. That is a product that, other than the fact that they found a few copies in the warehouse unboxed a couple years ago and sold those at a reasonable price. The solitaire module goes for quite a bit of money. My personal preference, if I was going to play ASL solitaire, would be to just play in solitaire without any special mechanisms involved for solitaire play. But there are people that do like the solitaire, the fairly elaborate. It's ASL, so of course it's going to be fairly elaborate solitaire mechanisms that are present in solo ASL. So it will be nice for those people who want it and don't have it to be able to get it again. So I'm pleased. Um, Doomed Battalions will also go on reprint. Now, Doomed Battalions is the only ASL core module. That's the Allied Miners. It's the only one that I don't have an relatively recent MMP version of. I have the Avalon Hill Doomed Battalions. So I will be up for a new edition of that. And if they do anything on it, if they do anything with it like they did with Croix de Guerre, then I will be happy to pay that price, even though I'm really trying to not spend tons and tons of money on ASL right now. Neil Bedke says that he hopes MMP's Pony Re is better than Critical Hits. They mapped it to the current size now. Well, better than Critical Hits is a pretty low bar to limbo under, to be completely honest. So, McFud Pucker, welcome back, guys. Great to see you again. All right, now the last edition, Twilight of the Reich. This is a Bill Cirillo module, late war, obviously, as you couldn't tell by the name. Now, I was thinking maybe this was that Berlin 45 module that's been in the pipeline for a long time. Since suggesting or asking the question as to if that's what that was, and I think a lot of other people leapt to that conclusion as well. So, um, John Clark. MMP calls them reprints, so I'm calling them reprints. But in many cases, they're significantly expanded from the originals, so we could call those whatever we want. There's a website called Piss. It's Mark Pacavich's website the name of which is escaping me right now, which at least if it's been updated recently, is a really good resource for seeing exactly what is in what printing of what thing. Um, so yeah, James Whitmer, I'm in a similar situation on ASL. I'm really not playing it, so spending a giant pile of money on it seems like a bad idea. But I will pick up a new version of Doom Battalions, unless Desperation Morale. Thank you, Iggy Krichtal. That is in fact the webs and Michael Simon and Joel. So everybody picked up on that. Hexy, Critical Hit is they do some of their own stuff now. They do the advanced Tobruk system. That's their own, which does not look appealing to me, let us say. But yes, they started out as a uh, third party Avalon, third party ASL producing outfit that swiftly garnered a reputation for absolutely dire quality control. Um, and some truly boneheaded line expansions like World War One ASL and Civil War ASL and other stupid shit like that. So my opinion of them remains low. There are, however, fans of the advanced Tobruk system. If you want to go to their website and figure out what it is you are going to buy, if you want to get into that system, be my guest. I gave up on that. So not that I was seriously investigating that anyway. Michael Simon, if you know what Mark's day job is, that might actually make sense. Um, that Desperation Morale maybe hasn't been updated incredibly aggressively in the last couple of years. Hakapalo was a pretty recent module, though, too, right? I mean, it wasn't like, we're reprinting this thing that has been out of print since we ran out of Avalon Hill copies 15 years ago, like Quadigera was. So Hakapalo was, they made a slips and errata in there, but yeah, it was pretty straight. All right, so let's start putting some stuff into trays here because otherwise there's too many pieces. Anyway, let's move along. Now, here's where I'm a little confused. There is under ASL Starter Kit, there is also a Marco Polo Bridge incident thing listed. Now, I'm not sure. I thought, and maybe I'm misremembering this, that they said that module was going to be usable for either one. If it is a ASL alone module, full ASL module, then I probably don't need it. If it's a starter kit module, I probably will buy it. And if it's for both, I probably will buy it. So it sounds like they may have split that thing. Yes. And if so, okay. I mean, they got to do what they got to do. But at the same time, I'm a little confused now because I thought that it was coming out as a one all-in-one module, which was something they haven't done before. So it'd be curious to see how this works out for them. There will be an ASL starter kit magazine released. That's interesting. I think maybe they're counting on people who don't feel like they need to graduate full ASL, which is not a traditionally catered to demographic. Um, I personally think it's a good idea because I think there's a decent number of people that enjoy, it maybe even enjoyed the original squad leader and want something of comparable complexity and not the quantum leap in complexity that ASL represents. We're going to have to make some more magic happen here in this tray. Maybe two magics actually. So, like I said, I'm curious to see how that news develops. For the Battalion Combat Series, now there's a giant pile of BCS stuff in the pipeline, but the only thing that they're reasonably confident will go on pre-order this year is Valley of Tears. That's Arab-Israeli War, I believe, the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. I could be wrong about that. And I will order that to support BCS, but it is not a conflict I have any interest in whatsoever. So, they're doing a great job over on BCS. I'm delighted that they're continuing to support it. But I am much more looking forward to any of the several World War II things that they have in the pipeline, much more so than Arab Israeli Wars. Then again, it does seem like Urbis Really Wars is heating up a little bit as a topic, which is, it's been a while since that's been the case. Great campaigns of the American Civil War. On to Richmond 2 will be released, and Skirmisher 4 is planned for pre-order and release. Now, last time they did a Skirmisher, they also just said, hey, it's available. Here's a lower price for 3 weeks or whatever it is. So, Alistair Logie, thanks for stopping by. Um, so after On to Richmond, now On to Richmond's made its number handily, so that no mystery about that. After On to Richmond, the next module is going to be Vicksburg, and I'm told that after that, the next module is at least likely to be a new packaging of Stonewall in the Valley, along with the Sheridan in the Valley 1864 Sheridan's Valley campaign, which will be fantastic. It will mean that there's only one product in the original product line from Avalon Hill that hasn't been redone by um, MMP in a graphically upgraded format. That is going to be Stonewall's Last Battle, which is weird because I felt like that's a missed opportunity. They missed the opportunity to put that in Stonewall Jackson's Way too, because it's on that map. So all they would have had to do is add the counters and the scenarios, and we would have been all set. So yeah, we're going to get to this in just a second too. I don't have any special insight into that, but I'll tell people the news. All right, for the Grand Tactical Series, work will continue on the reprint of the Devil's Cauldron. That's a vague statement. I'm not sure what that means. Now, we do know, because they've said, that is not getting upgraded to GTS 2.0. That's unfortunate, but it's not like it's not an awesome game under 1.0. Now, that's been unavailable for a long time. I was able to get a copy for a high, but not like, oh my God, I can't believe I had to spend that money a price. So I'm okay, but I'd like more people to get a chance to enjoy that particular game, which is probably the strongest game in the whole series from a complete package standpoint in terms of strength of scenarios and all that stuff. The GTS magazine, GTS briefings, which will have a game in it, will be released. The Greatest Day Utah Beach will be released. I am on the hook for that, as well as On to Richmond too. I haven't pre-ordered anything else on this list. Like I said, I canceled St. Marigly's. And Jeff Beeler just picked up GTS Greatest Day Gold, Juno, and Sword. James Whitmer, are the earlier Skirmisher magazines worth getting? They seem very expensive. Okay, so there's three so far. There's two that they did back in the 90s, I think, and then one that came out last year, which I actually recently released the unbox unsleeving of. The third one is nice, but a lot of it is essentially advertising for what's coming up, so it feels rushed and underthought. Number four will have more substantive material, including a campaign in it with map. Well, probably you play it on an existing map because the existing maps cover almost the entire Eastern Theater of the U.S. Civil War anyway. Um, the big focus in Skirmisher 1 is the transition to a series rulebook away from individual rulebooks for individual games. Now, that came out right around the same time as Grant Takes Command, so Grant Takes Command uses that series rulebook. Also included is the retrofit counter sheet. It's a half counter sheet. I think you can download it off the GCACW resource site on MMP's website, which contains we're not just knocking stuff over here, folks. Which contains the counters you need to run the older games in the series with that series rulebook. There are some slight adjustments that needed to be made to do that. You should be able to run that down online, I believe, and make your own. We're not talking about a million counters. Okay. However, if you aren't interested in that, like playing the Avalon Hill versions of the games with the new rules, then there's not a huge reason to get Skirmisher number 1. Skirmisher number 2 contains 2 campaigns, one of which is Rebels in the White House, which is included in Road to Gettysburg 2, the other of which is Burnside Takes Command, which is the Chancellor's Fredericksburg campaign, not Chancellorsville. Chancellorsville is covered in Stonewall's Last Battle. Now, Fredericksburg is kind of a shitty battle to play out at a tactical level, but at a campaign level, it is more interesting. That has not been reprinted anywhere, and I'm not aware that of any plans to reprint it anywhere. I'll be happy to be corrected on that point. So, to my mind, Rebels in the White House, you've already got if you've got Rose to Gettysburg 2. But to my mind, Skirmisher number 2 is nice to have if you're interested in that Fredericksburg campaign. So there's that. And yes, they are reasonably expensive. Um, Jeff Beeler, is the current skirmisher worth getting if you only own Stonewall Jackson's Way 2? I would say, unless you are already a committed aficionado of this series, then I don't believe skirmisher number 3 is. I mean, I don't think it's a waste of money, but I don't think I would give it an incredibly strong recommendation in that context. Okay. All right, so moving along. International game series Storm Over Jerusalem will be released. Crown and Crescent is on pre-order. I am cordially uninterested in either of those games. Of the two, Storm Over Jerusalem looks more interesting. It is Siege of Jerusalem, not mechanically. It's an area impulse game based on that same topic, the Roman siege of Jerusalem in whatever it was, 63 AD or something like that. And that's an interesting topically, but I don't know that I want a game on it particularly. Nevertheless, lots of people loved Siege of Jerusalem, so I kind of think that is going to do reasonably well for them. Crown and Crescent's another one of those things that I'm unconvinced is a good fit for multi-man publishing's audience, but if they prove me wrong on that, I will be happy as anybody else. Line of Battle, the long awaited, no turning back, the Battle of the Wilderness will go on pre-order. Now, Dean Essig, the series designer, and we'll talk about this in a minute, was at Winter Offensive running a playtest game of No Turning Back. So that is well along at this point. It has taken a while, but we are going to get a Line of Battle 3.0 rulebook out of it as well. So there's kind of going to be a decent series upgrade from that as well. So bear that in mind. Okay, Operational Combat Series. OCS Crimea will go on pre-order. I was in the early playtest of that. It's pretty cool. It's a one map game. It's not the same Crimea map that you got in Case Blue because it's been kind of slid over about 10 hexes so that it adjoins more neatly with the Third Winter. So you are going to be able to play it with Third Winter, which is pretty cool. That way you won't have to like ignore that southern flank anymore. And in addition to that, I believe you have was it early 42 or late 41? I believe it was early 42, initial German invasion scenario as well. So it's kind of a 2-in-1 pack. Um, um, it's going to be worthwhile for East Front OCS fans specifically. So I'm definitely going to order that. Operational Matters 2 with Luzon. That's going to be the magazine and issue 2. That'll be great. Luzon game is real small. I haven't played that, but I've seen it set up at a number of places. Will go on pre-order. A reprint of Operational Matters containing OCS Sicily 2 will go on pre-order. This is, I think, something of a surprise given Multiman's historical antipathy towards reprinting anything that doesn't say ASL on it, and even a decent amount of the stuff that does say ASL on it. So, interesting news out of the OCS camp. William Bird, I will get to your question in a second here. Interesting news out of the OCS camp. Chip Curtis Bear has stepped down as OCS honcho. Dean Essig has stepped back into that role. I have no idea any of the background that happened over there, but obviously we all wish Curtis well since we've been playing with Curtis for a number of years now. And of course, we'll be delighted to see Dean take an active hand in that as well. Now, I think that Mr. Essig will be at Winterfest. And if so, I will try to corner Mr. Essig for an interview. You will see that when it occurs. That'll probably be a recorded thing and not a live thing, by the way, because live broadcasting from that site kind of sucks. So now, getting to William Bird's question, how complex is Line of Battle compared to GBACW? I believe the two are pretty comparable. I believe, and Hexy and Wardrobe talked the other night on this exact question when they went through this list, and they're pretty comparable. the one of the sticklers in there's a couple of sticking points in GBACW that I think are confusing, and were in previous versions of the rule book confusingly written. Those things are line of sight and certain interactions of the way orders work and some of the timing. You don't have any of that type of confusion in line of battle. Now, you do have the written orders system, but it isn't complicated particularly. Some people won't like it, and I guess that's fine, although I think it's awesome. Um, but it is technically optional, and even if it wasn't, you could technically just ignore it. So, line of battle has line of sight rules that are almost as fiddly as GBACWs. GBACWs are fiddlier, but line of battle has more elevation levels, which complicates things in practice a little more than GBACWs. Relatively lower number of elevation levels on most maps, anyway. Um, but in line of battle, you have an explicit direction from Dean that says, everybody read these rules and then just eyeball it and everybody make a decision that everybody agrees with. And that enormously speeds play and keeps you from having to look at the rule book all the time. And in something like GBACW, we were looking at the rule book all the time to look this exact thing up. So I appreciate that. From a game flow perspective, from a tempo perspective, I believe that line of battle flows better than GBACW does. But you have a little more detail in certain areas in GBACW as well. Plus, you have the chip pull mechanic, which a lot of people like. And hell, I like it. I like both systems. I'm uh, not trying to bash one or the other. As Chad Canady mentions, both GBACW and line of battle, I'm sure he means, are excellent. William Bird asks, so it slots between GBACW and the Blind Swords games. Yes, but it's much closer in complexity to GBACW than it is Blind Swords. Blind Swords is very easy. Line of battle is not difficult, but it's more toward the GBACW end of things. So and I agree with Brian Jarvis. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Dean has in store for us in Line of Battle 3.0. All right, moving along so we can actually get to Avalon Hill. Standard Combat Series Ardennes 2 is on pre-order. Now, this is basically a pretty rebuilt version of the original SCS Ardennes on the Battle of the Bulge. I think there's reasons to be excited about this. I also feel like I may have hit that point where I am not yet done playing Bulge games, but I may be done buying Bulge games. So I don't have any plans to get that. And I have several SCS games that I really like. I don't know that I feel obliged to expand my personal repertoire of SCS games, which again is not to say that SCS is not awesome. It's great, but for it does what it's intended to do extremely well. It's just not where I am mostly as a player right now. This is a good point. James Whitmer says he likes the chip pull mechanic of GBACW for solo play. A lot of people do. I think that's a completely reasonable statement. Peter Scheif, we've already talked about Under Richmond 2. They expect it to ship this year. One True Flem says summer, and that around mid-year sounds about right. I mean, this is not inside information. This is me hunching my way through it. I think that sounds about right. Sometime around mid-year sounds about right. All right. And for a reprint of Rostov 41, yet another unexpected reprint. The only expected reprint on this list was we knew they would eventually do Doom Battalions again. So Rostov 41 is a very solid SCS East Front game. So be happy to see. Again, I probably don't need it, but if you are interested in that, and it's a rock solid entry in that series, then I think you should take a look at it. So that's something I haven't seen before. And TCS Goose Green will go on pre-order. Now, this is going to be a entry in the bagged TCS series like Ariete. Goose Green is an infantry battle that occurred during the Falklands War. Um, there are folks who are interested in this topic, and I believe Carl Fung is the designer. And if so, I wish Carl the best with that, but I am probably not going to pre order that. Wardrobe, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you for the support. And you should check out his channel too, by the way, if you haven't for some reason. He's been doing this for a long time and would appreciate your support as well over at the Wardrobe channel. And he has a ward robe too, I believe. So, all right. So, excuse me for the coughing. Let me know, by the way, if you've noticed a difference in audio quality tonight versus previous weeks, because I made some microphone adjustments and hopefully it sounds better. Um, uh, Jason W asks, do they usually put new GCACW games on pre-order when the current pre-order ships? No, not necessarily. They don't really do this for any series, except for ASL, which always has at least one or two, maybe more, items up for pre-order at any given time. So no, this isn't normally part of the pattern. That said, um, I don't expect another GCACW game to show up on pre-order this year. I don't want to overemphasize. I've been talking to people, and nobody's given me a date, but I feel like it sounds like Vicksburg is a little farther away than that. So, which is unfortunate, but we got what we got. So, I'll be delighted to see Vicksburg. So, I would be thrilled. Well, let me put it this way: I would have been thrilled had they reprinted None But Heroes when I was looking for a copy of None But Heroes. But thanks to friend of the channel, John over at Half-Ass Gaming. We have a copy now. A deal was arranged. So he got some stuff and I got some stuff, and I was happy with my stuff, and I hope he was happy with his stuff. So I would love to see a reprint of None But Heroes, which I have played and which is excellent. So that's the Battle of Antietam in Line of Battle, by the way. All right. Before we get too digressed here, let's resume our tour through Avalon Hill with 1984. And we're talking about the game Firepower. Now, this is a kind of ambitious game of modern tactical combat, okay? Kind of from Vietnam forward. I've never looked at this game, but first of all, one of the things that jumps out at me about it is the fact that it's ambitious. And the second thing is that the designer is S. Craig Taylor, the late S. Craig Taylor, who was one of those designers that I think made the magic happen more often than random chance would account for. Really talented designer of flat top wooden ships and Iron Man, a bunch of other really good stuff. This is a designer that I think is worth at least an examination of, which doesn't mean I think you should go get this game on eBay. But if you're interested in the topic, maybe investigate it and talk to some people, read some forums on it, that kind of thing. It is interesting looking. By the way, I have left out some of the goofball non-genre products that are typically included that I've been wasting time with on the last couple of shows. So we're not going. This isn't going to be complete, but it wasn't going to be anyway. So anybody's got really burnt about me leaving off something stupid, feel free. And even some of the goofy stuff that I had something to say about is in here. So this is not one of those things. This is Bonsai. This is the expansion, the Pacific Theater expansion for Upfront. A very well regarded and well remembered game. Attempts have been made in recent years to kind of recapture the Upfront magic, and I'm not sure they've come through, although they may have benefits. They may have virtues of their own on their own merits as well. So, so this is Courtney Allen design. That's the same person, the same designer that brought us the Area Impulse system. Mark McNair says he's had a copy of Firepower for 30 years. I've never gotten much out of it. Always found it interesting. Never played it much. This isn't one, Firepower, that isn't one that I hear much about nowadays, except as a footnote, right? It's not like I've never heard of it or how I remember seeing it on game shelves, but it's not something that seems to be generating a lot of discussion nowadays. There are a variety of reasons I think that might be the case. One is that it's a relatively obscure Avalon Hill title. One is that it's on an oddball topic. And two, three, maybe the game doesn't work as well as it should, or is made obsolete by more up to date information that people have access to now that they didn't back in 1984. So there's a variety of reasons why maybe nobody's talking about it. I don't know what the actual answer is. Vicky, welcome back to the stream. One True Flem mentions Vicksburg will be awesome. So, next up, still in 1984, is this is actually what I was planning to end the show last week with. And then I looked at the clock and I'm like, oh crap, it's like 10:20. So we're not going to get to that. But today we get to Advanced Squad Leader, and we will be covering the official ASL product. So we have a lot of mountain divisions here, and I'm not sure where any of what the color guide is on these units either. I mean, they're Germans, but otherwise. All right. So, Advanced Squad Leader. This is an attempt. Started out, to my understanding, started out as an attempt to kind of just create a new rule book for Squad Leader in the post GI Anvil of Victory era, and developed into a pretty distinct standalone game after having been essentially rebuilt from the ground up. So it's very much its own thing. But when it was published back in 1985, and I only regret not having my original copy a little bit. I've got, of course, got a new one now. They were actually telling people, don't try to learn the rules from this book. Go buy a copy of regular ASL and learn the rules from that, which is a really very interesting way to try to address learning the game, I think. It's not the only game to ever do that. I think it's a dumb strategy. I think maybe you need to rethink your game if that is a thing that is necessary. But in this context where it is an evolution, it is kind of seen as a more advanced, if you will, version of an existing game. That decision probably made more sense here. Vicky, we just got into the Avalon Hill stuff. This is literally entry number 3 in the Avalon Hill list. The rest of the show prior to this, which was almost 40 minutes, was dedicated to looking at Multiman Publishing's upcoming production schedule for the year. And that's another thing too, is you didn't get what you needed to play the game in this. You had to buy Beyond Valor too. And speaking of which, it's Beyond Valor. So this was kind of like a two-piece set, right? And it's interesting that this was kind of in the works right around the same time we started hearing some stuff about second edition AD&D, by the way. Yeah, we'll talk about Paratrooper in a second. But in order to play the game, you needed the rule book that gave you the rules, and you needed Beyond Valor that gave you 8 boards. I believe no, actually, in the first printing, it wasn't. It was only 4 boards, and they were still the mounted maps. You had to get the original 4 boards out of the original Squad Leader set, which is again a really weird and fascinating decision that they made. And people complain that today's war game companies are soaking people out of money. Um, so, nowadays when the original Squad Leader isn't in print anymore and hasn't been forever, I'm glad to see Multi-Man has at least worked their way around that by now including those other boards in Beyond Valor. But Beyond Valor gives you the boards and the counters and the scenarios, and not just the Russians and the Germans. Russians, because that's what they're called in ASL instead of Soviets. It irritates me too. But the informational markers too, which you do need to play ASL. It's not there's a sense in which it is not a terribly marker heavy game, but there are a lot of markers, right? So the need for all those markers is, you do need a lot of different markers depending on exactly what you're trying to play. um Next up, another game released that same another product for ASL released that same year, Streets of Fire, ASL Deluxe Module 1. So what this was is this was a set of, I want to say, 4 boards, which were bigger than the regular ASL boards, which are roughly 8.5 by 22. Um, and these are roughly 4 times that, and the hexes are way bigger. The hexes are, in fact, at a micro armor scale, and these came with vehicle cards so that you could play with micro armor on these boards. Now, I am sure that somebody tried that at some point, and maybe people are still playing like that. I am unaware of that ever occurring in my vision. So, nevertheless, some of the scenarios for Deluxe ASL were quite good. So in the last couple of years, MMP redid the sort of deluxe package with basically all the deluxe stuff for both modules, plus a few extra things and extra. Old Lady Plays, welcome back to the stream. Um, with a couple of extra things that had been added in various annuals or whatever, because every once in a while somebody would do a deluxe scenario because they liked one of those boards. Now, the first one is Streets of Fire, which is pretty much Stalingrad scenarios, or at least urban scenarios. The second one is Hedgerow Hell, which is mostly Normandy scenarios. So bear that in mind if somebody's really into Stalingrad or really into Normandy, and who's not, then I can totally see why you'd want the scenarios. But I mean, nowadays you just buy them. So, all right, exiting 1985, we go to no, still 1985. I meant those to be last. Russian Front. This is a Neil Zimmerer design, and it is kind of the less fondly remembered cousin of Russian Campaign. Everybody played Russian Campaign, and I think this was reasonably popular as well. But it never really seemed to acquire quite the mystique that Russian Campaign had, even at the time, and retains today. Um, I believe this is probably a decent game, and I wouldn't mind checking it out at some point. But it's like, if I was to prioritize this, this would be like number 30 on the list of things that I need to investigate. So we're gonna buzz past Russian Front here. If anybody else, Tim Zale says it's one of his favorites. Um, and Matt Taylor says they played in the 90s with Micro Armor. So yeah, we got a number of people in the chat mentioning that they did in fact see people or tried to play themselves with Micro Armor. No, we're still not in 1985. Damn it. Dark Emperor. This is a Greg Kostikian design. This is one of the fantasy games that I always kind of wanted, and I'll show you the map here because there's a pretty good shot of the map in BGG. It's a real interesting looking map. James Talbot is credited as the artist. I've never owned this one. You can see that clearly the map is intended to, and this is a fantasy game, bear in mind, clearly intended to represent a landscape obliterated by meteor strikes or possibly nuclear explosions. So, pretty neat looking map. And it's a 2-player game, and there's kind of an interesting mechanical thing going on there where the Dark Lord shows up and gets stronger and stronger as the game goes by. And the other guy, presumably opposing the Dark Lord, needs to kind of assemble this alliance to oppose the Dark Lord. And if they wait too long, the Dark Lord is too strong. So that's actually fairly interesting. Mo from Mo's Game Table is here. Welcome, Mo. Um, did I miss Mo? Where's Mo? Well, we're actually at the point where the chat's going by so fast, I'm having trouble keeping up with it. So I apologize to anybody who I miss. Um, Peter Scheif, who produced the massive mini map Barbarossa game in the 80s or 90s. I'm not sure what's being talked about here, but there's two things that spring to mind. There's Mo. Mo, welcome back. Two things that spring to mind here. One would be Fire in the East and Scorched Earth from GDW, but those were released in the 80s. And the other thing would be the Second World War Barbarossa, which is not a reissue, not a revision, kind of a reimagining of Europa at not exactly the same scale, but a very similar scale all around. 2 turns per month, 15 miles to the hex. Unit scale if they name a scale, they'll say divisions, but that's bullshit. The vast majority of counters on the map will be regiments or battalions. So um and indeed that is one of the core problems with the entire with Europa that um the Second World War series does not fix. So I think you're talking about one of those two games, one considerably earlier than the other. All right. So next up, Dark Emperor is pretty neat, pretty cool cover too. I got to say, I don't know who did the cover art, and it's probably not telling us. Might be James Talbot. Pretty cool cover. Um, this goes for a little more money than I'm willing to pay for it out of idle curiosity. But if I see it at a garage sale, I'm totally grabbing it. Platoon, the movie tie-in game, and my understanding is that, and I've never played this. My understanding is that the scenarios are actually built on situations from the movie. Um, this is an S. Craig Taylor design, however, so it could be that S. Craig Taylor phoned it in here, but I don't know. I'd be curious to look again. I'd be curious to look at whatever he was working on. He is a designer that I think would really be doing something special now were he still with us. In much the same way that say that John Butterfield is doing. Um, this is uh, Tim Sale says that the movie tie-in turned him off on this, and I think that's reasonable. But bear in mind that this was far from the only commercial partnership type thing that Avalon Hill did. Now we've talked about a couple of those, and we're going to get to at least one more tonight, assuming we get through all those tabs that you see across the top tonight. I'm not 100% confident in that, but we'll see how far we get. Next up is Kremlin. This is a Urs Hostetler design, and I am not sure if this originated with Avalon Hill or not. It looks like this was brought over from Germany, 1986 German release, and Avalon Hill did it in 1988. Now, there have been since the and Avalon. I actually got this. It's actually pretty amusing looking. Um, the Since the Avalon Hill version, this has been redone several times, differing fairly. At least a couple of those have differed fairly dramatically from the original edition. And hell, I was considering this Avalon Hill one the original edition. But there's like some of them have completely fictional people, some of them have the historical people, some of them are one version is played like a satire. So you might want to do some research if you're going to pick up a copy of Kremlin to make sure that you're buying the right copy of Kremlin that suits your own tastes. There is a more recent version, this thing from Jolly Roger Games. This is the most recent one. This isn't even the one that I was thinking of. I was thinking either that or the Jolly Roger Games version doesn't. That picture is not particularly reminiscent. I don't know, but there, like I said, there's at least three different English language versions of this, and they're all radically tonally different. So do your research if you want to get into those things. Flight Leader, design here Gary C. Morgan. This is supposed to be a very detailed game, as I recall. Designed by fighter pilot Captain Gary C. Morgan for U.S. Air Force training, is a highly realistic yet easy and fun to play game. They always say they're easy and fun to play. I don't know if this is true or not. Stuka Joe, welcome back to the stream. Thanks for stopping by. I think it's incredible if somebody watching here tonight is not already subscribed to Stuka Joe, who's bringing us dynamite coverage from the fantastic looking El Bayotacon in Spain. Unfortunately, the chances of me getting to that, I think, are asymptotically approaching zero. In addition to the fact that it would be an expensive trip, my Spanish sucks. So I am probably not getting there. But it does look really good. Flight Leader. I mean, that for the ham alone, I think it looks awesome. But the gaming scene there looks really good as well. Drew Dederer says it's actually pretty simple, mostly about managing move to contact. Okay, that's interesting. Maybe that is simpler than what I'm picturing in my head. I do think it's a striking cover. Um, I'm not interested enough in air games in modern air games, I should say. World War II air games, that's a little bit different. Even World War One air games. Modern like jet fighter games, I've got one supposedly. It's on my list of games I have, but I can't find it. That's Red Storm. Simpler than air superiority. I believe that's a safe statement, actually. All right, next up is Britannia. This is, I believe, the Fantasy Flight cover or somebody else's cover. This isn't the. Let's look at the versions here. The original Avalon Hill version was. Oh, this actually says also came out in Germany first. Uh, and this Avalon Hill version is the second edition. Now, this is the cover I remember though. This is a Lou Pulsifer design. I'm right about that, right? Yes. Okay. This is a Lou Pulsifer design. Lou had a video out the other day that I thought was had some interesting points in it. That I don't necessarily agree with, but Lou is always interesting to listen to, even when you don't necessarily agree. This is a strategic game about the Roman Britain and post-Roman Britain, I believe. I've never played this. It's got a really good reputation. It's been printed by a number of companies since then, and there is a relatively recent version, which I should have looked at right here. Fantasy Flight second edition from 2008. That's not that recent, actually. So I don't know what the print status of Britannia is right now. If I were going to buy it, I would just probably try to run down an Avalon Hill copy of it. Even if I were going to Star Warriors. Are we talking about Star Warriors, the Star Wars tie-in from West End Games? Because we're not covering West End Games tonight. Lou's been providing, and again, you don't, and I don't believe Lou is expecting you to agree with everything he says while nodding sagely. Um, Lou puts out a lot of thought provoking stuff and has been saying thought provoking things for decades. So, yeah, props to Lou for getting on YouTube with the youngsters like me and making an ass of himself like myself. So, history of the world we might get to tonight. Um, Next up, I've played this too, actually. It's one of the two 18xx games that I've actually played, the other being 1835. This is 1830. The cover we're seeing, I believe, is a Mayfair cover from much, much later. We will see, I think, in here this is the cover I had back in the day. And I actually think this is a pretty good cover, to be honest about it. I mean, bear in mind it's the mid 80s, right? It ain't gonna look that nice. So this is an 18xx game. It's an economic rail building and stock buying and trading game. And every time I've played one of these, I have enjoyed it. The scene from four 18xx games nowadays is, I would say, one notch less intense than the competitive ASL scene. So these guys are into it. Okay, so bear that in mind. My recommendation, if you're interested in 18xx, is find your friends to play with and don't just try and step into playing with the people that go up to the club and play literally 18xx every day, um, every week for 12 hours a week. So those folks are just at a different level, and you will spend eons there getting rolled in a dark alley. So not my recommendation, but I have, whenever I've played an 18xx game, I have actually enjoyed it. So even if I grumble about having enjoyed it later on, which is a thing that could happen. This is, like I said, the later Mayfair version. This might be available now too. Certainly there's here's from Lookout Games, English edition 2021. That's probably still floating around. So if you're into 18xx games, this is a pretty good one. But it's not like you're starved for titles if you're into 18xx games. All right, we're getting back to ASL here with ASL Module 2 Paratrooper. Now, by this point, I think that it had become evident that maybe this whole thing where you were supposed to play a different game to learn how to play the game that you just bought was maybe not the optimal learning strategy. And so they put out ASL Module 2 Paratrooper. Now, this serves a couple of purposes. One, it is a much smaller module than Beyond Valor, so it was much less expensive, with Americans and some American scenarios involving paratroopers. And it also included sort of a walking mechanical tour. It's hard to explain that ASL rules chapter without actually like trying to walk through it. That is a decent, but I think I found fairly tedious mechanical walkthrough of ASL rules concepts. Um, I think as a learning vehicle for ASL, I feel like ASL Starter Kit does a much better job than Paratrooper did. Tabletop's Edge, welcome back to the show. Thanks for stopping by. 1822 by All Aboard Games is a nice intro to the 18x6 series. Okay. Um, Rail Baron is a different thing. I can tell you that. And they did, as Ronald Johnson mentions, they did do a computer version of 1830 as well. Back in the day when Avalon Hill was doing computer games, which is a bit of a surreal situation, but hey, we got what we got. All right, Thunder at Casino by Courtney Allen. This is another area impulse game. Also pretty well regarded, possibly not quite as legendary as a couple of the others. But this is Battle for Monte Cassino in Italy in late 1943 or early 44, something like that. And this is, I mean, it's a fascinating battle. It uses area impulse, first used in Storm over Arnhem, subsequently used in Turning Point Stalingrad and Breakout Normandy. Breakout Normandy is the one I'm going for to be able to experience this system. We talked about this system last week. Another area impulse game, kind of one of the classics. Jeff Taylor says that Chapter K in Paratrooper is the best way to learn the ins and outs of line of sight. That does make sense. I mean, given the just kind of the way. I mean, it's a pretty noodly piece of the rules, right? As line of sight, frankly, tends to be in every game that includes line of sight. But nevertheless, as a broader mechanical approach, I think that wasn't necessarily a great idea. Maybe this is the complicated one I'm thinking of it. Then maybe that was something else from SPI. I'm not sure. TAC Air by Gary C. Morgan, another one from U.S. Air Force pilot Gary C. Morgan. Puts you in command in the most intense and technologically advanced combat environment on Earth, Central Europe today. So this actually sounds kind of interesting. You've got it sounds like it may have operational elements, which I find appealing, especially in an air game where Brant, thanks for stopping by. See ya. Um, the uh in an air game where those elements are seldom found. Let me put it this way. Um, Pretty decent looking map for the mid 90s, I suppose. Probably the only period I think, probably the late 80s, early 90s was probably the period in which Avalon Hill was probably leading the pack on maps, I think. Um, GDW was never really amazing at maps, frankly. Counters they were pretty good at, and frankly, their counters were generally nicer than Avalon Hill's counters. But don't forget that the die cutting quality is a factor there as well. Raid on Saint Nazaire. This is about the raid on Saint Nazaire. It is a solitaire game. It's very well regarded. Credits here on BGG include Robert Markham and Mark Seaman. Raid on Saint Nazaire is kind of one. We're going to get to at least one more of these tonight, I believe. See how we're doing on time. We are not making as rapid a progress as I'd wanted. This is one of kind of the classic Avalon Hill solitaire games, along with B-17 Queen of the Skies and Patton's Best. This is also a pretty unique historical situation, so that helps that it is a really interesting historical situation. I don't know too much about the historical situation, but I have watched a documentary on it, and I do not feel that I can give it justice while not sounding like a complete idiot in the context of this video. So read up on it. And actually look on YouTube for the documentary. It was very good. But it's a fascinating topic. It's basically a raid to cripple a German port. And it, very well regarded solitaire game. And I still see and hear about people playing this all the time. Speaking of, Avalon Hill Classic Solitaire Experience, is Patton's Best. So this is a Bruce Shelley design. This is very fondly remembered. I am not convinced that it provides. I'm not convinced that it doesn't. But I'm not convinced that this is going to hold up comparatively well compared to, say, do I have any more? A more modern take on the same idea, as represented by something like uh, the various tank games from DVG, or the Greg Smith solitaire games, or anything like that. This is, of course, a solitaire game. You're driving a Sherman tank around. So if you want to reenact the film Fury, you can first of all shoot the director, and then play those scenarios out as much as you want. Am I screwing? Damn it! I am screwing this up. There we go. All right. I need a spacer set for this tray as well. So again, very fondly remembered game. I think at this point, for the sake of running this down, what's this running for? VG for $10. That's a good price. Unless it's like this was only the empty box, which is something you see sometimes. Probably not from these guys though, not from CLS, I would think. That seems like a really good price. I wonder what the story is behind that, unless it's actually not VG. I don't know. I don't know. Look at the entry. $10 for Patton's Best seems like a really good price, considering this individual wants $65 for a good copy. Ray Garby, I mean, this is not a phenomenon limited to Patton's Best either. Rose-colored glasses and nostalgia and all that. Um, that's just a fact of existing in the hobby that we exist in, right? Where there are still people out there who will tell you that the golden age of wargaming was back in 1980 or 1970 or whatever they think. um, and they're not necessarily wrong, but we're really seeing a kind of second wind of wargaming right now, I think, and I think a lot of other people will agree with me, in the last, say, 10 years or so. So I would personally, if I were looking for a solo tank game, I would be looking at something like Sherman Leader, or Sherman Ace, or whatever Greg's game on that topic is called, before I would be looking at Patton's Best. But take that with a grain of salt. Knights of the Air, 1987 Mick Ull game. This is World War I air combat. Um, this is so like Richthofen's War was a game that I think almost everybody played at one point. And it was one of those sort of key points of entry to the hobby for a long time. And Knights of the Air is simply not as well remembered. Now it came around, 10, 20 years later, 10, maybe 15. Um, so it is a much later game. So bear that in mind. But um, it does not seem to have attracted the mystique of a game like Richthofen's War, or Luftwaffe, as far as air, or even Dawn Patrol, aka Fight in the Skies, as far as air combat games go. World War I air combat games, that is. We have so many of these German divisions; it's just insane. This is just the West Front too. So I'd like to go back and reorganize the East Front game as well. Dawn Patrol. Yeah, I was disappointed in Dawn Patrol, but that's because I thought I was getting a role playing game when I got it, and I wasn't. And they were selling it as such, but it wasn't. Um, I mean, it had role playing element to it, but it was in that you'd have like a persistent pilot. But that's not necessarily a role playing game right there. If persistence makes it an RPG, then Pandemic Legacy is an RPG, right? And I don't believe any of us are going to try and make that statement with anything resembling a straight face. um Dinosaurs of the Lost World, another Mick Ull title. This looks kind of fun. Also looks aimed at youngsters, based on the cover. I infer that adventure game for 8 and up, right? It's not as nice looking as you'd think. I don't think this map is particularly attractive. I have no real knowledge of this game, by the way. So take everything I'm about to say here with a big mountain of salt. But if you're like super into dinosaurs, which as I was a kid, I was super into dinosaurs. So and whales. I was really into whales as a kid as well. But um, this is not like a super attractive looking game, especially coming out when it did in the late '80s. I think they could have done better. But it did include like these like weird little comic booky type adventures, which sound kind of neat. And I'm kind of thinking that's a bit of a novel idea. And you can see the pieces are fairly uninspired as well. But that's me saying that in 2023, right? When we've got all these, where Europa Universalis, The Price of Power just came out, and it's like a $300 Kickstarter with 27 pounds of material in it and all that stuff. So we are spoiled nowadays here in board gaming and wargaming. Um, ASL Module 3 Yanks. This is the full Americans module. Ed Holtzman preferred Tyranno X, which I think I could understand. Um, Yanks is the ASL Americans module. This included chapter. Why they broke the rules up this way? Great question. I don't know. I think it's dumb. Chapter E. I suspect though that it's because Chapter E wasn't ready when they published the rule book. But if you wanted Chapter E with all the special situational rules for stuff like attacking at night and stuff catching on fire and all that stuff, you needed Chapter E, which you didn't get in the rule book. You had to get it in Yanks. And until relatively recently, MMP was still doing it that way. The most recent version of Yanks doesn't do that, but I'm not sure that's true. I think it does. I think the most recent version of Yanks is the one that I have, and it has maybe it was the printing before. It still has Chapter E in it. That's just absurd to me that um, they're still making these, they're still perpetuating these presentational artifacts that Avalon Hill managed to paint themselves into doing back in the mid '80s. I just baffling to me. But in any case, I don't have much more to say about this. Partisan ASL Module 4. This is 8 scenarios focused on partisans, German and Axis minor troops occupying the lands. Uh, yeah, it's pretty much partisans. Um, Partisan scenarios have popped up in other modules since then. Some of them might be in Armies of Oblivion. I forget exactly where they popped up. Hedgerow Hell, this was mentioned before. This is the second and last deluxe ASL module, although deluxe ASL materials would continue to pop up for many years. Old Lady Place says a lot of ASL culture is about tradition. I mean, I would say that I don't know that this is more true about ASL culture than it is about anybody else's culture, but you're absolutely right. That is absolutely true. But that's also putting up just absolutely idiotic barriers to entry as well. A lot of which are admittedly mitigated by the presence of ASL starter kits. So it's not quite as simple as maybe I'm making it sound. So speaking of weird corporate advertising tie-ins, Spices of the World. BGG says this was developed in collaboration with a spice company. It doesn't tell us which spice company, but I believe it was McCormick. And it might even say that on the box. Oh, it totally does. Why does the BGG description not say that? I actually think this cover's a pretty cool cover, I gotta say. But again, I'm not sure why this, was seen as a good idea. I mean, remember that Avalon Hill was still making a lot of money on things like sports games and stuff like that. And I guess you got like little vials of spices in the pawns. I mean, that's kind of neat, right? But otherwise, you like travel around the world collecting spices. So slightly novel. Merchant of Venus, Richard Hamblin design. Um, this is an interesting looking game. I had this back in the day and never played it, and I think we tried it once or twice and bounced off of it. However, this game has a following to the extent that it was redone by Fantasy Flight again. I think so. Fantasy Flight Games plus some other places with obviously updated graphics. The original Avalon Hill version has this very pulpy cover, which I thought was absolutely charming and tonally appropriate at the time. Manders points out that McCormick is in Baltimore, so from that standpoint, yeah, that does make sense, doesn't it? I'm pretty sure I didn't know that, but now that we have established that, it makes a little more sense why that would they would do such a thing. In any case, this is an economic game in which you're puttering about the solar system, trying to buy and sell stuff. I don't know that there's a. It's a got a. I think a. See if I can get a good picture of the map here. I think a reasonably map that doesn't immediately grab you by the collar and say engage with me. Let me put it that way. Not even as interesting a map as something like High Frontier. But again, this game is very has a very hardcore following, and you got quite a bit of stuff in the box. You got two counter sheets, an amount of map, and some pawns and some fake money and all this stuff. So interesting looking game. I'd kind of like to play it at some point, but it's another one of those things that is relatively low on the priority list. Enemy in Sight. Originally called Cutthroats and Cannons, 2 years in the making by Neil Schlaffer. Schlaffer. Lost Battalion Games? Does that mean they brought this back? Hold on a second. Because Lost Battalion Games is, oh, look at this. So this is the original edition? All right, hold on a second here because, yeah, okay. So the original, why does it say, okay. So what I believe we're getting here out of this versions page is that the original was the Avalon Hill game in 1988, and that the 2014 edition from Lost Battalion Games, which, as far as I'm aware, is still a going concern, by the way, is their first edition of it. Okay, this is a card game about basically, not sure if it's pirates or if it's just Age of Sail. Um, Yeah, I'm still not sure if it's pirates or if it's Age of Sail, but there might be pirates in it. Um, looks like we got some really great registration on here. Thanks, Avalon Hill. Um, so, for that era, I don't think there's an excuse for that. I like the cover art. I think the cover art is pretty good. Matt Davidson, Andrew Franca say that it's just Age of Sail and not pirate specific, which makes sense. Next up is Gettysburg 88, as we call it. Now, this is S. Craig Taylor, and it's another basically complete redesign of Gettysburg. And this is a let me see if I can find the counters because the counters are interesting. Yeah, so you got these rectangular counters, which I think at least one of the earlier editions had as well. But then you've got like these oversized hexes, and it actually looks kind of neat. This is, I believe, a somewhat simpler game than earlier versions. I don't even want to put it that way. Earlier games called Gettysburg from Avalon Hill. This should be a decent and playable Gettysburg game. Let me put it that way. And again, as Craig Taylor, so I think there's something to be said there alone. Do we have? They did this in a Smithsonian edition as well. Now, interestingly, they don't have a re-implements here, even though it clearly re-implements an earlier version. So I'm not sure what's up with that, BGG. Octavian says Gettysburg 88 was the first Tex Encounter game they bought at age 13. Ooh, and James Conway bought it at the Gettysburg Visitor Center. All right, West of Alamein, ASL Module 5. This gives you the rules for desert fighting, as well as the British order of battle. Not the Italians. That's confusing because they've changed this fairly significantly in more recent versions. But this is the original desert kit. And until this material was brought back in Hollow Legions, I think we've been without desert rules for a long, long time. To what extent that those desert rules are changed, I don't know. My guess would be that they're not changed very much. But ASL has been a pretty stable game. There have been a lot of clarifications and corner cases added to the rules, but that's pretty much what they are rather than actual rules rewrites or anything like that. ASL has largely been a pretty stable game system. Moving on from West of Elmain, The Last Hurrah. This is the Allied Minor: Poland, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Yugoslavia, and Greece. This is the original Allied Minor module. I think I have the components to this and toss the box. Um, but that's why I would like Doomed Battalions, because it'll have the, remember that you got like, this was like the infantry stuff, and there was going to be like a separate module for the other stuff, the vehicles and that. And that was Doomed Battalions. And then Armies of Oblivion was never released by Avalon Hill. It wasn't released until later by Multiman. So, feeling very throaty here. Don Greenwood's Turning Point Stalingrad. My voice felt bad like 5 minutes in, to be honest about it. Turning Point Stalingrad, another area impulse game. Other also pretty well regarded. I want to say this has been redone. Do they have a re-implements line here? No, of course not. I believe somebody else redid this under another title, like Storm over Stalingrad or something like that. I could be misremembering that. But this is another very well regarded area impulse game out of Avalon Hill. In this case, by Don Greenwood, the man himself over there for many, many, many years. Siege of Jerusalem. This is Jesus Christ. Okay, hold on. Wow. Okay. Original version of Siege of Jerusalem from historical perspective. Fred Schachter and Steve Weiss. And then we have this Siege of Jerusalem third edition from Avalon Hill from 1989. Where'd the original? 1976. Okay. I'm not sure I recognize that this was a pickup by Avalon Hill. Designers here: Fred Schachter, Bruno Senegalio, and Steve Weiss. I believe Bruno was pretty closely involved with developing and or designing this particular edition. It's a pretty big game. I'm not sure if we have a contents here. We don't, of course. I believe this is two maps, two unmounted maps. Those are definitely unmounted maps. So it's a pretty attractive game for its era. It's a pretty attractive map for Avalon Hill of its era. Then again, a lot of times they put their nicer maps. Maybe this was the thought process. Maybe they decided, hey, this map looks so good, we can get away with not mounting it, like they did with the great campaigns of the American Civil War. But I actually don't think that's it. In all seriousness, I think what it is there's two maps in here. So they weren't going to try and mount the maps. Old lady plays Polish Lancer run up to the tank. She saw a movie clip where the Polish Lancer rode up to the tank, jumped off the horse, dropped a grenade in the hatch, leapt back onto the horse right away. I mean, I do think it's generally considered that the whole thing about the Polish charging the tanks on their horses is general. Not, I don't want to say that it never happened, but I believe it is generally held to be a let's say a bit of historical hyperbole. That said, I'm sure there was a movie there, a scene in a movie where that occurred. Very well regarded game, very well remembered game. It's supposed to be a lot of fun to play. One of these days, it's on the list of things I want to do. But I believe so. In addition to Storm over Jerusalem from MMP, I believe that Compass is working on a new edition of Siege of Jerusalem. How exactly that's going to work, I'm not sure. I haven't asked, and I am willing to investigate it when I need to. Meaning, it's awaiting release. But I believe they have said that. Now, there's some extra modules for this, which I'm not going to cover. This is Napoleon's Battles, and it is a set of Napoleonic miniatures rules that came in an Avalon Hill bookcase box with counters, just in case you wanted to play without the miniatures, which I applaud as a noble effort that was immediately rejected by all of the miniatures people. I can't really tell you how closely this was adopted. I can tell you that I've talked to one or two people who are familiar with Napoleonic miniatures rules and who say this rule set is actually quite good. Joe Perez, I believe it is the same Fred Schachter. I could be wrong, but I believe it's the same fellow. So I don't I don't hear anybody talking about Napoleon's battles, but I'm not into miniatures. So if somebody who is into miniatures, um, tells me something different, then I will happily nod my head rapidly and agree with what they're talking about. Doug Sunsets, for example, says it's quite good and widely hated by Empire players. Now, my understanding is that players of everything else hate Empire. So, but that is the complete third hand opinion that I am parroting from somebody who knows more about it than I do. MBT by James M. Day. This is the same game basically as the more recent GMT game, although I believe it is significantly revised. Matt Davidson says there's been a few editions of Napoleon's battles. That's interesting. And S. Craig Taylor designed again, right? John C., thank you so much. Played exclusively Avalon Hill games with his cousins back in the day. Stopped when they all started college. Remember, he had to get most of our Avalon Hill from Hong Kong. That makes perfect sense. Andrew Frankie says that Napoleon's Battles is dead. I have no opinion on this. I like I said, I believe I've said all I can about Napoleon's battles without simply repeating myself saying keep I don't know I don't know. I don't know that either. I'm sorry. 250. Well, it's not $250, I can tell you that. But John, thank you anyway. Moving along to Desert War. I am super unclear. This is an expansion variant to Upfront. I should have dropped this one. This is looks like it was in a magazine. Maybe not. Published by Wizards of the Coast. I'm not sure what that's all about. Wargame Vaulted. Oh, that's why. Okay. Avalon Hill First Edition. Yeah, this would have come in the general, I would think. No, actually, this was a little standalone envelope pack. They did a few of those back in the day, and then this is the one for that you can get on Wargame Vault. So that's why I'm finding the cover to be quite alien in terms of Avalon Hill, because it's not an Avalon Hill cover. So if you have the Wargame Vault edition of Upfront, presumably you've already got this too. Hollow Legions. This is the module for the Italians with more desert stuff in it. The Italians are in a medium gray, which is an interesting choice. It's interesting because they didn't choose a similar color for the Germans. The Germans are instead in a blue that I think is a color that doesn't make much sense. But maybe it doesn't matter because it has varied widely between printings anyway. Um, Thanks to the fact that whatever was going on at Avalon Hill kept them from paying a ton of attention to print quality issues. Now, Hollow Legions was redone by Multiman a couple of years ago, in a vastly expanded new edition. And if you're going to get it, get that one. We're not going to cover all these annuals, but I thought I'd put at least one in here just to kind of make a note that 1989 was when they started doing sort of a periodical schedule for ASL as well. These did come out basically every year for several years, and in a couple of those years, they did two of them. So you'll see like a 1992 B, 2A, and 2B, for example. I think all of these are available on Wargame Vault now. If there were extra counters, they're not included. If there were extra maps, they're not included. Um, they may leave out the scenarios, which would be really lame if they did, but I'm not sure. But I would look into the PDF versions of these, frankly. Next up is wrestling designed. So I, as an somebody who actually was on the wrestling team in high school, I am contractually obligated to despise professional wrestling as a sport of charlatans and actors. I respect that they are, in fact, good athletes for the most part, and that they are entertaining, and that's great. But it is not my thing. The game is designed by Bruce Harper, who you might know better as the guy who designed A World at War. So I am going to talk out my ass and say that this game is the World at War of professional wrestling board games. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But Scott Bell, thanks for stopping by. But based on this cover at least, and I did watch it as a kid. I must admit, but quick playing fighting cardboard game. So if you're into professional wrestling, and I know lots of people are, and if that's what you get enjoyment out of, good for you. I don't need to watch it. Yes, there is a bundle available, and if you are going to buy the rule book, I would frankly buy the digital rule book nowadays too, um, because you can search it, and they update it when there are updates. They update it, so I would totally buy the digital version, and if I really want to print it, I could print it. It's only 700 pages, right? Um, so here's Tyranno X. Um, This is the Mosquito Spiel edition. Did they bring this over from Germany? It looks like they did. 1992, Avalon Hill brought it over. This does not look like an Avalon Hill cover, in my opinion. Very atypical art style. Interesting looking dinosaur game. We already had somebody say that, and that's a good point. Old Lady Plays. Not only can they update it, they have been updating it. That's fantastic. I am much happier with that than to deal with. Oh, I got to get the new pages and the new module that came out so I can replace my old pages. I mean, we don't need to be doing that anymore. Andrew Atkin, I believe that's approximately correct. About $60, yeah. So it's a bit cheaper than the hard copy would be, but it's better than the hard copy because they update it. And it's complete too, right? It's not like I don't have the chapter 8 pages for the Japanese. I mean, you got everything there. It's you except for the historical stuff. You've got everything there. Republic of Rome. This is a picture of the Valley Games edition, which I do not have and have not played. I played the original Avalon Hill edition. This is a multiplayer. I wouldn't call it a war game. It has a military element. But that military element is very much something that occurs on the side, and which you can influence. Um, it's about as much of a war game as Churchill is, and I make that it's not particularly similar to Churchill in many other ways, but it has a similar approach to handling military affairs, which is to kind of have a thing over here, have a box or a track or whatever it is over here on the side, and every once in a while you got to go see to military matters. But the heart of the game is political maneuvering in the Roman Republic. It is a pretty long game if you play the whole thing, but it is broken into 3 eras, and you can play one era or 2 eras or all 3 eras if you want. And you are not obligated to start with era 1. You can start with era 2. And the game more or less ends when the Republic is not a republic anymore. As Doug mentions here, semi co op. Yes. So the enemies of Rome, if the enemies of Rome win, everybody loses, right? So there's certain amount of motivation to cooperate with people to get the military stuff done. But you're always looking to knife the other dude in the between the ribs too. So um, this game is great fun. I think it's a tremendous game. It does work best as a multiplayer game with at least 6 people. I think it handles up to 8. This says 1 to 6, but I'm not sure that's true. If it's 1 to 6, I would not play it with less than 5. Um, I mean, this can happen, and this is what Doug means by semi co-op. You do have to kind of work together to get that shit taken care of, and then you will, then proceed to the backstabbing part of the game. But it's a tremendously fun game. You can bribe people. You can just nakedly corruption. I will pay you 15 sesterces or whatever the currency is to vote for me, and then I will vote for you as tribune. And then they vote for you. They give you give them the money. They vote for you, and then you don't vote for them as tribune. So you're under no obligation to live up to your bargains. It's absolutely chaotic. It's great fun. if folks are going to tell me that it doesn't really work well, I'm prepared to say that they're right. But it's a tremendous amount of fun anyway. Now I have heard good things about Founding Fathers, but I have not played it. And we're not covering it tonight. New World. I've never played this one. Derek Carver, Don Greenwood. A multiplayer game about the discovery, colonization, and exploitation of the Americas. Um, Players explore the Americas while discovering gold, encountering native uprisings, and battling pirates. Gain control of 5 regions in the New World at the end of any turn, or by having the most money after several turns of play. Um, it would be interesting to revisit this as a what's considered a sensitive topic nowadays and see how this game handles it. That said, I am insufficiently motivated to do so. I do think there are good games on this subject. There are good things that have been released on this topic in recent years as well. Um, and that's not to say that the game can't be fun either way. To call it a Conquistador Light, I think it looks like an ultra light, actually. But I think that's basically true. Jeff Anderson says that John Company, which is about the British East India Company, by the way, was inspired by Republic of Rome. And I can believe that. All right. Next up is Napoleon's Battles Module 1. This is just more scenarios, I believe. I don't know why I didn't take that out. ASL Historical Module. This is the first of the historical modules, Red Barricades. It's a huge two map module with a huge campaign game set in Stalingrad, in like Stalingrad city fight, where you're like digging the Soviets out of every basement and sewer. Midway 1991. This is obviously a complete redo of the earlier Midway game. But this one's by, again, S. Craig Taylor, who did just so many good designs that you kind of want to give this a look. This says it's very similar to Guadalcanal. It looks like it's got some double blind elements, which is intriguing as well. Uh, Basic game is very simple. Now, this makes, I mean, that to me, that screams flat top, right? The Duck Overlord, welcome back to the stream. And Nerd Workshop, welcome back. So yeah, any S. Craig Taylor game is at least worth checking out. Pretty decent looking ship counters too. Although that sort of light blue on dark blue print on light blue counters is a really bad idea, Avalon Hill. Or tan on blue. Well, I mean, apparently they're apparently everybody working at Avalon Hill in the graphics department had perfect eyesight. Because I wasn't going to put up with that kind of bullshit even back in the day, let alone now. March Madness. I don't know much about this. This is a college basketball game. The only reason I left it in the list is because I know that there is a tournament of this every year at WBC. So people still love this thing. You could probably still getting. Looks like you have again actual players. Which means at least at least fans are probably putting together, more recent teams for on cards as well. Oof. Okay, Andrew Atkin, the most recent Stalingrad product that Multiman has done is actually Red Factories. Yeah, Red Factories. That is post Valor of the Guards. Now, what Red Factories is it's a combination of a new Red Barricades, a new version of Red Barricades, which is not hugely changed from the original, and a second module with two adjoining maps called Red October. So it's basically Red Barricades, except they added two more maps, doubling the total size, and added ways for you to play the two campaigns together, which means that, holy cow, that's a hell of a monster game right there, right? Valor of the Guards has a pretty good reputation as well, but I think it's not quite as much a favorite as Red Barricades is. Now, if they were to do, more Stalingrad city fight stuff, I'd probably buy that for historical modules. And Valor of the Guards is on my list. It's just that it's not something I need that I'm going to pay $400 for. Legends of Robin Hood, Courtney F. Allen. This is a area movement game. This is not the same game as the old OSG game. This is something that they did much later. And I don't know that I have really anything to say about this. It looks like a card type game. It's probably okay. Um, I mean, sure, but if you can get red, you might still be able to get red factories. I would say definitely get red factories. Valor of the Guards has been out of print for some time. Duck Overlord, Death Ride Normandy doesn't require any size clipper. However, if you're going to clip those counters, you're fine with either one. I like to use they are half-inch counters. I can tell you that. So I like to use a 2 millimeter on half-inch counters. There are a couple games where I have done something different. ASL is actually one of them. Um, but we're gonna get there, Patrick. Welcome back. Anytime. History of the World. I've played this too, but it's been a long time. Um, this is an interesting game in which you play a succession of civilizations. This was I think somebody redid this. Yeah, a brief history. Oh, Jesus Christ. A brief history of the world, because the other one was too complicated for people. Now, I will agree with anybody that says History of the World was one of those Avalon Hill things that took too long. It was. It wasn't as bad as some of the other ones, but it really shouldn't take as long as it takes. Um, how many versions do we have here? There's an Avalon Hill Hasbro edition, so there's that. This is the one I had. It's an interesting game. That idea, that civilization hopping idea, has popped up in a number of other places as well, including some much more Euro-y games than this. It's pretty Euro-y. D-Day, once again, S. Craig Taylor assigned the unpleasant task of redesigning Avalon Hill games from the 60s. This too is a complete redesign, and if you've seen the old map, you'll know that it's a complete redesign. This looks very straightforward. I mean, I'm basing that just on the scale, right? Redesigned, simplified version of the original classic Avalon Hill D-Day, which has two versions as well, 61 and 77. Okay. And it's one of the Smithsonian games. That's great. There's a historical and a what if scenario. It looks significantly streamlined to me. Wow, that's a terrible picture. BGG bounces my pictures. If I submit something if they don't like the angle, they reject the picture. But this guy with his blurry ass picture with his thumb in the way, that's no problem, huh? I mean, I agree with Doug where you can't really do Normandy without pink and blue. This is a good point, Jeff Beeler. Mystery of the Road goes faster if both sides lose a unit in ties. Blackbeard. Okay, so there's two different games called Blackbeard. One is this one from Avalon Hill by Richard Berg. The other one is by Richard Berg, and it's from GMT. They are basically on the same topic, but they're completely different games. The the GMT Blackbeard is kind of an attempt to modernize the topic with sort of newish mechanics. This game is much more like a pirate simulator. It's very Bergian. I had the GMT version and didn't like it. This is the one that I wanted, and I played this back in the day. This is a really neat game. As long as you understand going in that you are playing a pirate simulator. It solos extremely well. You can just play one ship, or you can play all the ships, and see what happens, or whatever. So this, I after like sitting on a eBay search for this for years, where it was just never at the price I wanted to pay. I ended up raising the price a little bit and settling for a punched copy, which is complete. I've checked it. So it has now been on my shelf for a year or so. And I think Fucko actually bought me one, and it never showed up in the mail, and he had to get a refund on it. Yeah, so I mean, of the two, I think this is the superior game, but a lot of people didn't like it, right? A lot of people complain that it's too mechanical or whatever, it's over chromed, and that's not wrong. It is over mechanical and over chromed. But I like that. Like I said, I think if you enter into it as it's less of a game than it is an Age of Piracy simulator, I think you might enjoy it a lot more. It's very similar to Source of the Nile in that respect, actually. All right, here's another S. Craig Taylor Smithsonian Series game, Battle of the Bulge. This is Bulge 91, third version of this famous game produced by the Avalon Hill Game Company. Others were produced in 65 and 81. This is yet another streamlining and simplification, which we should not be surprised to see at this point. If we look at the map is actually decent looking. Um, I'll be honest. I think there's like historical value, not historical value in terms of examining actual history, but in terms of examining wargaming history. I think there's a lot of value in playing a game like Bulge 65, okay, or at least some value. I mean, the only reason I think this is even worth a look is because S. Craig Taylor did it. Um, Otherwise, it's just another Bulge game, another Avalon Hill Bulge game, but it is a completely different game. Attack sub Courtney Allen. This is a card game. Card-based war game similar to Upfront, modern submarine warfare, NATO versus Warsaw Pact, but there is some Falklands War stuff as well, so that's intriguing. And we can see these cards are fairly busy. Again, low quality photographs allowed by the BGG people when I get my photos rejected because there's glare in the picture. So this is supposed to be fun. Attack sub is supposed to be pretty popular. John, that may be because the same artist worked on it. I'm not sure. All right, Advanced Civilization. So this is an expansion. This is not standalone. This is an expansion for the Francis Tresham Civilization. And the design credits here are gibberish as far as Board Game Geek. I'd want to go to the actual game. And I do have this. I actually threw the original Civilization box away and put both this and the regular Civilization, the original, in the same box, which is still on my shelf in the other room right now. It's still my original copy. I love Civilization. I think it's a great game. I think it's got significant issues. I think it's fair to point out that it has significant issues, but I think it is nevertheless a great game, and is still worth our time nowadays. Next up is and one other thing is I probably wouldn't play Civilization without using the material for Advanced Civilization. Stonewall Jackson's Way. This is the genesis of now you may want to not play with the extension maps, the Western and Eastern expansion maps, depending on how many players you have. Those aren't necessary, but I think the Advanced Civilization stuff is. Those were actually separate anyway. Stonewall Jackson's Way, Joe Balkowski design. This is the first game in the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series. Gorgeous maps by Charlie Kibler. This is the one series where I don't feel like I need to, where I did feel like I wanted to get everything, right? Even where I've got Stonewall Jackson's Way too. Do I really need Stonewall Jackson's Way? Well, no, but I got it anyway. Same thing with all of them. So I have everything for this series. I love this series. It's a fantastic game series. It really displays the challenges inherent in command and maneuver at the operational level in Civil War. I love this system. It's one of my favorite game systems. Stonewall Jackson's Way is the Second Bull Run, right? So Second Bull Run campaign, and again, it's at the operational level. If you get the reprint now, if somebody's not as fanatical about collecting these to me as I am, I would say yes, just get Stonewall Jackson's Way 2. Stonewall Jackson's Way 2 has this campaign in it, the second Manassas campaign, and the first Manassas campaign. That module is called All Green Alike. So you get like twice as much stuff. And All Green Alike is really pretty neat because it's very early in the war, right? It's in the first few months of the war, and nobody knows what they're doing yet. Both battles are, of course, won by the Confederates historically, but fabulous game system, beautiful maps. The original pieces are not bad, but I mean, they do look a bit plain on this map. Multiman made what I feel was like an earnest effort to update the map graphics. That was, let's say, not a rousing success. A lot of people hated it. So they backpedaled a little bit. Oops. they backpedaled a little bit on that, and in the more recent products, they've kind of met halfway with a counter design that is a little more similar to the original counters from the old games, while still having updated graphics. And I will say that, my first GCACW game was a Battle Above the Clouds, which had the new style counters. And for whatever reason, I did find, and to this day I do, find the counter style on the units and leaders visually confusing in that game. Less so with these original ones. I agree with Octavian here. Best maps in wargaming. Um, Here Come the Rebels is is Andrew's favorite game in the series. Here Come the Rebels is my favorite game for introducing GCACW to new players. I'll tell you that. John Longshore asks, "Is my tutorial video available somewhere? Missed it a couple weeks ago. I have it. It's on my hard drive. I have. I was like, I'm gonna edit that sometime this week, and then a tree fell on my fucking car and the flattened the shed. So sorry if that hasn't happened yet, and I know that's an excuse, but it will be up eventually. I was reminded today that that does need to get done, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I wanted to edit it before uploading it. It is about 2.5 hours. I think I get into an hour and a half, and it'll be a much more compact and accessible video for people who want a quick glimpse at great campaigns, the American Civil War. In the meantime, it's not like you do not have Patrick of Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials and his excellent channel, which covers GCACW in quite a lot of detail anyway. So, highly recommended over there, as I'm happy to continue to say every time I see him. But yeah, mine will be up eventually too. All right, next up is Guadalcanal, S. Craig Taylor, Smithsonian series, very similar to Midway. So once again, basically a redesign of a Avalon Hill classic from the '60s, tying in with their Smithsonianizing series. Um, Once again, this is a little less well trodden of a topic than, say, D-Day. So I'd be more inclined to give this a look than I would be. And this is the naval stuff, though. This isn't like the Marines, although that may be in the game. This isn't a game about the Marines fighting it out on Guadalcanal. This is about the naval stuff. So so bear that in mind. But again, S. Craig Taylor, always capable of interesting work, and I think this is probably worth a sniff, just for that reason alone. But I don't know that it's something that I would put high on a priority list to check out. James Whitmer says he prefers the new counters, but the old maps. Um, so the maps have been redone, right? So they're not just like they reuse the old art. They did redo the art on the maps, and it's the same style, but it does look a little different. And the the stock is considerably shinier now than it was back in the day. The old maps were a very matte finish, which I like. Can I get away with one less compartment? Maybe. I like the sort of matte finish as well, but I mean, I don't have a strong preference either way for one set of maps over the old set of maps. I like of all the stuff they've been doing, I actually like the new counters, and the maps are gorgeous regardless. Patrick is playing material from Grant Takes Command 2 from On to Richmond 2, which will be out supposedly this year from our friends at Multiman. So hopefully they will come through on that. We're about clipped out for tonight, and in fact, I'm gonna motor through some of these real fast here. Global Survival, 1992. I think this is an acquisition from Vision Quest. You'll notice that its rating on BGG is absolutely in the toilet. This is a very poorly regarded game. I bought this back in the day and couldn't make heads or tails of it. So not something I think anybody wants you to play. It looks like like a shittier version of Monopoly. Gangsters. This is a card game or a board game. I think it's a board game actually, but you're like doing shootouts in the streets. Um, If you want this kind of game, I think I'd rather play something like Family Business from Mayfair than this personally. Your mileage may well vary on that, and that is fine. John Greenwood, Gerard Mathieu, or Mathieu. Breakout Normandy, John Greenwood, James Stoller. Classic. We've talked about this already in the Unplayed Classics show, so I'm not going to belabor the point. This is one of the Area Impulse games. It's one of the best regarded of the Area Impulse games. Um, very highly rated. There is a L2 version of this, which is also well thought of, but might be a bit hard to get. But I talked to Art Lupinacci at Compass Expo, and he says they've still got them. You just got to contact him to get to order one. So this is the I do this is on my want list, but I would prefer an Avalon Hill edition, because it'll fit on my shelf. Advanced Third Reich, Bruce Harper, after John Prados' original Third Reich. This is a significant expansion and complication of the original Third Reich game. I've played this. I think this has a lot going for it. I think it has problems, but I mean, part of the source of Avalon of Third Reich's problems, if you will, is just that people played the shit out of it for decades and found the problems, right? And some of the over engineering that resulted in Advanced Third Reich and later a World at War reflects the attempt to fix those identified issues because it's a lot of it is played competitively. Um, Now the companion game Rising Sun, I think, which covered the Pacific, I think was not as successful, and that's it because it was forced to deal with an extension of the Third Reich naval and air rules into the Pacific, where they worked less well. Gung Ho, this is the ASL module for the Chinese. Croix de Guerre, this is the ASL module for the French. If you're into the market for this, don't get this one. Get the new multi-man one. It's much better. We the People. This is a Mark Herman game. This is, by some accounts, the first card-driven game. Although I think, and I agree with that statement, but you won't see kind of the full flowering of the card-driven idea in this game. You'll see it in For the People later on. Now, how this passed to GMT, I don't know. But this game, basically the same game with some changes, is now available from GMT called Washington's War. This is the American Revolution, if you hadn't guessed. Roads to Gettysburg, the second game in. Actually, that's a good point. Here Come the Rebels and Roads to Gettysburg came out both in 1993, and I'm not sure which one came out first, but I believe it was Here Come the Rebels. And Roads to Gettysburg. I think these are both outstanding games. They're once again they're gorgeous games. I've personally played more of the content in Here Come the Rebels. Here Come the Rebels is kind of the Cedar Mountain scenario, which is in here, is kind of my default teaching scenario for GCACW. So I've kind of played it a lot. That was why I did Hood Strikes North this last time. So both outstanding games, and both by Joe Balkowski, who has recently returned to the series with Hood Strikes North, and an outstanding game that is as well. Charles S. Roberts Awards winner. Stay tuned on news for the Charles S. Roberts Awards, by the way. Roadkill. This is Car Wars meets it's pretty much Car Wars, actually, as an Avalon Hill board game. Having played Car Wars and having looked at this, I'd be inclined to play Car Wars, to be honest. I'm talking old Car Wars. I don't know about the new one. So, um, uh, all right, hold on a second. World at War is yes. So let me talk about this briefly. So the lineage goes Third Reich, John Prados, Advanced Third Reich, and Rising Sun by Bruce Harper, and then later on those pass to GMT and turn into a World at War, which combines the Europe and the Pacific stuff. I do say that um, the integration between Europe and the Pacific is a lot better in a World at War than it is in Rising Sun and Advanced Third Reich. And remember, there's no original generation of Pacific, right? It's just It's just Third Reich in Europe at that point. Um, I would not call it an indecipherable game, but I will tell you that it's another one of those rule books where the rule book is not designed for you to learn the game from it. The intention, and I believe the designer has been transparent about this. I just think it's a bad idea, that you will learn the game because someone teaches it to you, and that you will use the book as a reference book. I think that's a not necessarily illogical decision, but then I think you have to go the extra mile and support that in some meaningful way. And I do not feel that that has meaningfully occurred. Bruce does have a YouTube channel which does have instructional material, and indeed, so if you have really specific question, you might find that that helps. But generally speaking, you're not going to like learn the game from those videos. You're just going to get illustrations of rather specific situations. So um I think it's not a good uh strategy, and it's exacerbated by the fact that it is a really complicated game, right? If it was not a complicated game, it would not be quite as big of an ask. Anyway, IDF. This is the companion game to MBT, except this is Arab-Israeli wars. Um, I don't know if there's an intention for this to get redone or not. If so, I'm totally not interested in it because it's a topic I'm not interested in. Assassin. It's a card game by Chris Bayless, Rex Martin. I'm wrong. It's not a card game. You're actually moving around a map of Europe. I'm mixing this up with something else clearly because I'm trying to rush now and we're screwing it up. There are cards, I can tell you that. Oh, and terrible quality the cards too. I think the art is actually okay, but that perforated card stock that Avalon Hill used was just junk. Did they include a? Yeah, terrible. Um, Interesting cover. Makes This is the kind of cover that you look and think, is that the designer? Is that a picture of the designer? Um, and I don't know the answer to that question. John C. The most recent of the rule book version of the World at War rule book is closer to 250 pages. Um, all right, moving on. Kampfgruppe Piper, Volume One. This is during the Battle of the Bulge, tactical stuff. There's a Volume Two as well, which we're not going to get to. I really want to get to 1994, and we're in 1994. Maharaja. This is the Indian subcontinent version of Britannia. For those to whom that is appealing, and frankly, I think there's some people to whom that is appealing. Um, I don't really have an opinion on this game, having never played this or Britannia. So, but it is a cool looking cover. I'll tell you that. Rex Martin and Craig Sandercock. Okay, moving right along. Guerrilla by Neil Schlaffer. Multiplayer simulation card war game. That's a bit loaded. I've actually got this. I got a cheap copy of this on eBay a couple of years ago, and I haven't tried to play it yet. But it is nice looking. Now, this is a later Avalon Hill release, and by this time, they were like actual professional quality cards rather than. You're absolutely right, Joe Faust. Those do remind you of the old first Cosmic Encounter cards. I didn't think of that. I didn't put that together. Maybe it's the same artist. I believe the channel is called A World at War, actually. Anyway, Gorilla or Guerrilla. Actually, fairly fun looking game. Maybe we'll try it at some point. And then Colonial Diplomacy, different version of the original Diplomacy, which covers colonialism in East Asia, East and South Asia, and East Africa. I've never played this either. I'm not the world's biggest fan of diplomacy, and the real reason for that is I'm fundamentally not a people person, and that's really why. All right, folks, we are over time. We have blown through the last couple, but only really the last couple. So I'd like to thank y'all for stopping by. We do have a show with Dan on tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. There is a Thursday unboxing. What am I unboxing? Something will be unboxed on Thursday. I've already made the video, right? It's already uploaded. I just can't remember what it is. Um, I've switched it to 2 p.m. though, because some analytics said it 2 p.m. is a better time than 10 a.m. So let's try it. Thank you, Old Lady Plays, for stopping by. John C confirms it. That is, the channel is called A World at War. So, and Rob Johnson gave us the username for it. So you can just put youtube.com/, that at thing, and it'll go through. Don't forget to like the video. Please give the video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. We do have a couple of special things coming up. One of which is scheduled, I believe, for early March, which is already scheduled. Like, there's a placeholder for it. That might get moved, but that's the target date. And then we have an interview, which I have not yet scheduled, which is going to be next Sunday night. So there will actually be 2 live streams from me next Sunday. There will be an if assuming it doesn't get canceled again, there will be an RPG stream at 3, which will be about an hour and a half. We're probably going to talk about the OGL fantastic situation, which I've managed not to derail this show about. And then at 9 p.m., we'll have some special guests on to talk about some other stuff. So tune in for all of that stuff. I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by. Check out the links in the video description to the Patreon and the merch store and all that other stuff. We have the fine new Napoleonic shirts. I ordered one, and I think I showed it off already, actually. And I'm very happy with the Napoleonic shirts. But I ordered one, and I ordered myself a small, like an idiot. So if I wore it, I'd be like unable to breathe. It would be very uncomfortable. So I'd like to thank everybody for stopping by tonight. Do hit the Discord. Email me if you want info on any of the other stuff. And we will see you all next week for this show. And there will be, in 2 weeks, there will be an episode 5, The Best of Avalon Hill, and we will close it out with the last 5 years or 4 years of Avalon Hill. We spent a lot more time on the multi-man publishing update than I thought I was going to spend. So sorry about that, but we did get to it. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night.